Okay, let's try and unpack this. What do things like building worm farms with Giet, designing skyscrapers that look like giant parks,
vertical parks, yeah,
wrestling with complex international law out on the high seas, unlocking the potential of like seaweed, humble seaweed, right, and even rethinking sustainability and high finance. What do all those things possibly have in common?
Well, if you sort of step back and look at the bigger picture, they're really all pieces, aren't they? Pieces of this huge, intricate and frankly pretty urgent global push around sustainability and, protecting the environment.
Exactly. And what's fascinating is how these seemingly totally separate insights actually connect.
They really do shed light on the whole challenge.
And that's what we're diving into today. Welcome to the deep dive. We've sifted through a whole stack of really interesting sources, mainly drawing from Consumers.App.
Right, specifically their Consumers 360 news commentary from June 5th, 2025.
Yeah, so our mission here is to give you the shortcut, basically.
Yeah.
To pull out the key nuggets, the surprising links, and the so what behind these stories.
Giving you a quick, informed look at just how broad and deep this whole sustainability conversation really is.
That June 5th commentary really hammered home that breadth.
It really did, touching on everything from, very local personal stuff right up to global policy and big corporate shifts.
And that diversity is what makes it, really interesting, I think. It shows there's no single easy answer, no silver bullet.
Definitely not.
So where do you even begin with a topic this massive? Maybe with the next generation.
Well, that's actually what stood out in the research, this focus on education, starting early.
Okay, yeah. Our first headline, this one's from the Times of India, World Environment Day. 5 activities for kids to learn sustainability the fun way.
And June 5th was World Environment Day, so it's a perfect time to talk about engaging kids.
Makes sense.
The Consumers research really underlined that World Environment Day is a key moment, a platform for raising awareness among children about these critical issues: pollution, overpopulation, even global warming.
Sparking that early interest, that sense of responsibility.
Exactly.
But it's not just about sitting them down for a lesson, is it?
Yeah.
The commentaries seem to really push hands-on stuff, getting their hands dirty, literally.
Precisely. Things like setting up a worm farm for composting or maybe planting a butterfly garden. These aren't just, fun activities.
Right.
They teach fundamental concepts, ecosystems, waste cycles, recycling, even energy conservation, but in a really tangible way.
Learning by doing.
And the research noted it also fosters, essential life skills, problem solving.
That makes a lot of sense. What about maybe less traditional methods? Was there anything surprising in the research about how they're reaching kids these days?
Well, this is interesting. It raises a point about using modern tools. The Consumers research mentioned exploring AI-powered educational tools.
AI for teaching sustainability.
Yeah, think like interactive chatbots or even tangible little robots that can help simplify complex environmental ideas for younger kids.
Wow.
Using natural language, making it more interactive.
AI robots teaching kids about climate action. That is surprising.
It sounds a bit futuristic, maybe, but the core idea is translating these potentially abstract concepts into engaging experiences, things kids can grasp visually, practically.
Finding new ways to make learning stick.
Yeah.
So whether it's, like you said, dirt under the fingernails or interacting with an AI, the end goal is empowerment.
That's exactly it. The research really highlighted that. Participating gives kids this powerful sense of agency, of responsibility. When they recycle or garden or save energy, they start seeing themselves as active participants, as, global citizens doing their bit.
And did the research give specific examples, for tackling something really visible, say, plastic pollution?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Concrete things like organizing local trash pickup drives or getting creative, turning plastic waste into art projects and running workshops explaining the real harm plastics cause.
Direct ways for them to engage with a problem they actually see around them.
Right. Very direct.
So looking at this whole piece on kids' education, what's the main takeaway? Why is starting early so important? And maybe what can we learn from how they're approaching it?
I think the key is that starting early builds that foundation, a lifetime of sustainable behavior, sustainable understanding.
Right.
And it shows environmental ed doesn't have to be dull. It can be hands-on, innovative, and really crucially empowering, focusing on the solutions kids can actually be part of.
Not just the doom and gloom.
Exactly. Yeah. Not just the problems.
Okay, so from the scale of a kid's garden project, let's zoom way out to something monumental. Our next headline takes us into construction. This one's from Architectural Digest India. World Environment Day. 21 most beautiful sustainable buildings in the world.
Yeah, and what's really fascinating here is seeing how cutting-edge architecture is going beyond just, sticking on a few solar panels.
Right.
It's moving towards truly integrating nature into the buildings themselves.
The research talks about concepts like the vertical forest. That sounds, pretty sci-fi.
It does, doesn't it? But it's real. It's a concept from Stefano Bori. The idea is basically high-rise buildings designed specifically to incorporate huge amounts of greenery. We're talking mature trees, shrubs, plants, built right into the structure.
Like those towers in Milan.
Those are the prime examples, yeah.
So it's not just like putting a few planters on the balcony.
Oh, far from it. The Consumers' research explained these buildings actually function as urban ecosystems.
Wow.
They boost biodiversity right in the city center. They help purify the air, cut down noise pollution, and all that vegetation provides natural insulation, helps regulate temperatures.
Bringing the forest into the city skyline, essentially.
That's a great way to put it.
And the research wasn't just about, steel and concrete covered in trees. It mentioned other materials, too, like bamboo.
Yes, structures like the bamboo cathedrals, some designed by Studio Genqual and Ibuku, they really showcase using rapidly renewable materials.
Bamboo grows incredibly fast, right?
Exactly. So they use locally harvested bamboo, often without needing steel reinforcement, which allows for these beautiful, structurally sound buildings with a much lower environmental footprint.
Mm-hmm.
And the designs often leverage natural ventilation, which cuts down energy needs significantly.
Okay, so the core principles seem to be resource efficiency, conserving energy and water, using sustainable materials, reducing waste. The research also mentioned certifications.
Right, things like LEED and BREEAM, they're important tools. The research noted they provide these frameworks for evaluating and, importantly, verifying a building's environmental performance.
Making sure they actually meet tough standards.
Exactly, across the whole life cycle.
Okay, now here's where it got really interesting for me, something I just wouldn't have connected. The Consumers' research included a note about sustainability in software architecture.
Yeah, isn't that something? It raises that question. Where else does sustainability apply?
Right.
The research highlighted studies actually looking at sustainability in software design using tools like something called the Sustainability Impact Score, or SIS.
Okay.
It's basically a reminder that even in the digital world, our design choices have environmental impacts, often related to the energy used by the systems they run on.
Wow. Okay. From actual physical buildings to lines of code, sustainability really is everywhere. Did the research give some recent real-world examples of sustainable buildings?
Yeah.
Like from 2023?
Yes. Projects like Casa Adelante 2060 Folsom in San Francisco.
Okay.
And Nightingale Village down in Melbourne. They were mentioned as kind of exemplars. The research cited their focus on energy efficiency, using recycled or low-impact material, and also designs that really foster community integration alongside the environmental goals.
So stepping back from the cool architecture for a second, what does this whole discussion tell us about the bigger sustainability challenge? What's the main takeaway?
I think it shows that sustainability is fundamentally a design problem, not just, an environmental one tacked on at the end.
Okay.
Innovative architecture is absolutely crucial for creating cities that are resilient, livable, integrating natural systems instead of just paving over everything.
Right.
And that point about software architecture, that's a powerful reminder, isn't it? That every field, even ones we don't usually think of as environmental, needs to consider its resource footprint and design for efficiency.
Good point. Okay, moving from buildings on land, no matter how green, to the sheer vastness of the oceans. Our next headline is from phys.org. From sovereignty to sustainability. A brief history of ocean governance.
Yeah, and if we connect this back to the big picture, governing something so huge, so dynamic, so interconnected, the ocean is just one of humanity's biggest challenges.
It's incredibly complex.
It really is. A complex dance between national interests and this shared global responsibility.
And the history of trying to manage it is messy. The research mentions UNCLOS, the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea.
UNCLOS is fundamental. The Consumers' research described it as the main legal framework trying to balance, the rights of nations to use ocean resources with the need to protect marine ecosystems.
Okay.
It introduced concepts like exclusive economic zones, but also tools for conservation like marine protected areas. The research noted it's been ratified by almost everyone. But a key player, the U.S., actually hasn't ratified it. which is significant.
Right. So it provides a foundation, but there's still huge parts of the ocean outside national control. That's where this pending High Seas Treaty comes in.
Exactly. The Consumers' research really highlighted the importance of this treaty. It's part of a bigger agreement on biodiversity beyond national jurisdiction, or BBNJ.
BBNJ, okay.
Its goal is to set up a framework specifically for governing those vast areas outside national waters, the high seas. That's over 60% of the ocean's surface.
Wow, I didn't realize it was that much.
Yeah, so this treaty is seen as critical for boosting biodiversity protection and building ocean resilience in areas that were previously kind of a free-for-all.
And looking ahead, the research pointed to a big event coming up.
The UN Ocean Conference 2025, set for Nice in France.
Okay.
The Consumers' research noted that a key thing expected from this conference is the launch of a global network of ocean centers.
Ocean centers, what will they do?
The aim is to focus on developing more sustainable ocean economies, especially in emerging markets, addressing risks to coastal infrastructure, maritime worker safety, and critically leveraging community-based solutions.
Interesting. The research also seemed to include some quite technical, scholarly stuff on ocean dynamics, waves, acoustic modes. How does understanding that connect to governance?
Well, what's fascinating there is how the science informs the policy, right? The research mentioned those studies because understanding these physical processes, how water moves, how sound travels, is vital. They influence things like nutrient distribution.
Oh, okay.
So having accurate scientific models helps us predict how the ocean might change under pressure and gives us the data needed for effective science-based governance strategies. Science informing policy. Got it. Now, here's another one of those unexpected links from the Consumers' research. Something about blockchain mining and ocean sustainability. How does that connect?
Yeah, this raises that important question again about seemingly unrelated tech and its environmental footprint.
Yeah.
The research noted a study looking at something called oceanic games and blockchain mining, highlighting how increasing centralization in mining actually impacts governance within that tech space. Now, it's not about mining in the ocean,
right?
But the link is indirect, yet important. The energy demands of blockchain mining are massive, so understanding the governance and efficiency of those systems is relevant to the broader energy consumption picture.
Which absolutely ties into climate change.
And ultimately ocean health.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. From international law and marine science all the way to the energy use of crypto, it really is all connected. So looking at all this, the treaties, the science, these tech links, what's the core takeaway about governing the oceans? I think it's that governing the ocean is incredibly complex. Because of its scale, its global nature, all the competing uses shipping, fishing, conservation, resource extraction.
Right.
But the shift, the movement from traditional sovereignty towards global agreements like UNCLOS and this pending High Seas Treaty, coupled with better science and even awareness of these tech impacts, it shows a growing recognition that the ocean is a shared resource.
Requiring shared stewardship.
Exactly. Integrated global stewardship. It's a monumental task, no doubt, but absolutely essential for the planet's health.
Let's dive even deeper then into a specific, apparently vital ocean resource. Our next headline from Earth.com highlights World Seaweed Day 2025, Saving the Ocean's Sustainable Powerhouse. And June 4th was World Seaweed Day.
Yeah, and what really stood out in the Consumers' research here is just how much potential is packed into this, seemingly simple marine plant.
It's not just for sushi then.
No, not just for sushi. It's ecologically important, yes, but it's also seen as a key player in tackling major global challenges. Things like food security, mitigating climate change, helping restore degraded ocean environments. And a key advantage, the research noted, it needs no fresh water, no land, no fertilizers to grow.
Wow. Okay.
So World Seaweed Day is really about shining a light on this sort of untapped potential, encouraging investment.
And the research went into its versatile uses across different industries.
Oh, yeah. Food, obviously, it's nutrient rich. Cosmetics for its hydrating, anti-inflammatory properties.
Interesting.
Though the research wisely added a caution there. Responsible sourcing is vital due to potential toxins or heavy metals in some types.
Good point.
And significantly, its potential in carbon capture, used in things like bioplastics, biofuels, even pharmaceuticals.
Carbon capture is huge. Yeah. How exactly does seaweed do that?
Well, the Consumers' research explained it simply. Like plants on land, seaweed photosynthesizes. It absorbs huge amounts of CO2 from the water.
Okay.
As it grows, it stores that carbon in its biomass. Then, when the seaweed dies and sinks to the deep ocean floor, that carbon is effectively locked away, sequestered. And the research noted that sustainable seaweed farming can significantly boost this natural process, making it a really promising tool in the climate change fight.
So farming, it sounds like a great opportunity.
Yeah.
But are there downsides, challenges with doing it on a massive scale?
That's the crucial question, isn't it? Balancing opportunity with responsibility. The research did mention potential environmental impacts from huge harvesting operations.
Like what?
Disrupting ecosystems, maybe? So there's an absolute need for careful, responsible management practices.
Mm-hmm.
But the opportunities, carbon sequestration, biofuel, supporting local biodiversity, they're really compelling. The research also noted that traditional practices, like those developed over centuries in places like Japan, offer valuable lessons in how to do it sustainably.
And the research also mentioned health benefits from eating it.
Yes, edible seaweeds are incredibly nutritious. The research highlighted they're rich in fiber, vitamins, minerals, antioxidants, good for digestive health.
But with caveats.
Definitely. It included necessary precautions. Some types can have high iodine or accumulate heavy metals, so moderation, choosing reputable sources, that's important. And it can cause digestive upset for some people too.
Okay. And finally, its role just in the ocean itself as an ecosystem.
Absolutely vital. The research emphasized that seaweed forests provide essential habitat. They're nurseries for countless fish and other marine creatures.
Supporting biodiversity.
Exactly, which directly benefits global fisheries too. So integrating seaweed farming carefully with other marine activities could support both food production and ecosystem health.
So pulling it all together on seaweed,
Mm-hmm.
what's the big picture? Why should we care about this sustainable powerhouse?
I think it's that seaweed is just so much more than food. It's this multifunctional natural solution.
Right.
Its ability to help with food security, climate mitigation through carbon capture, ecosystem restoration, even providing biomaterials. It makes it an incredibly valuable resource for our future sustainability efforts.
Worth keeping an eye on them.
Definitely. Investing in understanding and scaling sustainable seaweed practices seems like a really promising path.
Okay, our final headline now brings us back to the world of corporate boardrooms, balance sheets. This is from AOL. Climate change and nature loss merit radical prioritization amid a sprawling sustainability agenda, say former CEOs.
Yeah, and what's fascinating here is hearing that call for urgent, focused action coming directly from, experienced corporate leaders, people who've been in the thick of it.
And the Consumers research really dives into how finance is increasingly tangled up with these goals. It defines sustainable finance.
Sustainable finance, according to the research, is basically about integrating ESG goals, environmental, social, and governance into financial decisions.
ESG, right.
The core idea is aligning financial investments, financial flows, with that transition towards a low-emissions, climate-resilient global economy.
Sounds like it's moving beyond just being a niche idea.
It really is. The research connected it directly to huge international goals like the Paris Agreement and major policy initiatives like the European Green Deal. It's seen as a critical way to mobilize the sheer amount of capital needed to fund green initiatives, transition industries.
The research also touched on how policy shifts, specifically in the U.S., can affect this space.
Yes, and the Consumers research took a pretty impartial look there. It noted how approaches have varied under different administrations.
For example?
Well, deregulation under the Trump administration created some uncertainty for sustainable investments, whereas the Biden administration's focus on climate provided a more supportive environment.
Oh.
The research highlighted that these political shifts can introduce volatility, basically, something investors in the ESG space need to navigate carefully.
Interesting how the corporate focus itself seems to be broadening, too. The research specifically mentioned companies incorporating biodiversity into their climate plans now.
Yes, and the increase they cited was significant. Consumers research mentioned 2025 CDP data showing something like a 165% increase in corporate focus on biodiversity.
Wow, 165%.
Yeah. Companies are really starting to recognize that climate change and nature loss are deeply linked. Two sides of the same coin, almost.
So they need to be tackled together.
Exactly. And they're starting to use frameworks like TNFD, that's the Task Force on Nature-Related Financial Disclosures, and SBTN, the Science-Based Targets Network, to measure and integrate biodiversity goals into their actual business strategies.
Was there another one of those technical nuggets here, too? What about information systems?
Yes, this raises an important point about the data infrastructure needed to support all this.
Right.
The research discussed limitations in current information retrieval systems, things like array systems, retrieval, augmented generation.
Yeah.
When it comes to really incorporating the nuanced expert knowledge you find in, say, corporate climate disclosures, it pointed to a need for better data sets that simulate how analysts actually work to improve how we capture and use this critical sustainability data.
So even the tools we use to track progress need improvement. The research also talked about the broader impact of corporate actions on planetary boundaries.
Yeah, the idea that corporate activities have major impacts on these critical environmental limits: biodiversity loss, deforestation, chemical pollution.
Right.
The Consumers research presented the idea that corporate initiatives, especially ones focused on restoring natural capital, could potentially help move the world back towards safer zones within these boundaries, maybe achieving some kind of balance by 2050.
That's ambitious. So what are the biggest hurdles then in achieving climate-related goals like the UN's Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs?
Well, the Consumers research outlines some major challenges: persistent inequalities, the accelerating impacts of climate change itself, biodiversity loss. It noted the pandemic made many of these worse, causing setbacks.
Mm-hmm.
And plus, there are complex trade-offs between achieving different goals, which makes those 2030 targets look particularly tough.
Given all those challenges, how are corporate strategies actually evolving to address both climate and nature loss effectively?
The research indicated a real strategic shift is underway. Companies are trying to prioritize the most significant threats, integrate biodiversity properly into their core climate plans, and developing more comprehensive, data-driven decarbonization strategies. And the research noted that investor initiatives like Climate Action 100 are playing a huge role here.
How so?
By putting financial pressure on companies to act, linking environmental risks directly to financial performance.
Money talks.
Essentially, yes.
So what's the bottom line then on this corporate and finance angle of sustainability?
I think it's that corporate decisions and the flow of capital are just incredibly powerful forces, right?
Hugely powerful.
And sustainable finance is emerging as a critical tool to try and redirect those forces towards environmental goals. While policy changes can create turbulence, the increasing focus from within companies driven by investors, guided by new frameworks, it shows this growing recognition. Environmental responsibility isn't separate from economic viability anymore.
It's becoming a precondition.
Exactly, a precondition for long-term success. So, looking back across this whole deep dive, from teaching kids about worm farms and the amazing potential of seaweed,
Right.
to those green skyscrapers, the complexities of ocean law, and the shifting world of corporate finance, what really emerges is this picture of sustainability being tackled on so many interconnected fronts at once.
Not just one thing.
No, it needs global agreements and local action, cutting-edge tech and ancient wisdom, corporate strategy, and individual choices. It's a really complex system, but you can see how progress in one area might influence others.
And this snapshot, drawing on that Consumers.App June 5th commentary, really gives you a sense of that interconnectedness, doesn't it? And the sheer variety of approaches.
Definitely.
It's not just about polar bears or emissions targets anymore, is it? It's woven into how we design cities, manage oceans, teach our kids, even how we write software or invest money.
It touches everything.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the news and trends surfaced by Consumers.App.
It really is sprawling agenda, like that one headline said.
It absolutely is. So as we navigate this world that's becoming increasingly aware of environmental limits, where do you see the most promising opportunity in innovation? Policy, technology, or maybe in those surprising places like seaweed or software? Something to think about.